The invitation was not extended lightly. Marjorie Taylor Greene had never been on Rachel Maddow's show. Not once in the 15 years it aired. The two lived in separate realities, opposite ends of the same stage, and neither had ever crossed that line until now. The offer came quietly, through Greene's communications director, the kind of pitch that usually gets a polite decline. But this time, Maddow said yes. It wasn't a trap. It wasn't meant to be a spectacle, at least not at first. What Maddow wanted was something few hosts dared to ask for anymore. A live conversation with no safety net, no tape delay, no post-editing, no agreement to stay off certain topics. Just the guest, the host, and whatever truth or tension surfaced between them. The studio had a different energy that night. Not loud, just heavier. The crew moved quietly, but they moved quickly. Camera operators double-checked angles. Producers whispered adjustments into headsets. One sound tech even replaced a backup mic that had never failed in 2 years, just in case. Everyone understood what was about to happen was unusual. Not historic, not explosive, just unusual enough to make people uneasy. Greene arrived alone, no entourage. Hair pinned tightly, wearing a gray blazer over a navy blouse, American flag pin aligned with military precision. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. She wasn't there to charm. Maddow met her in the green room briefly. No handshake, just eye contact. Then they walked separately to the stage. The music faded. "Good evening," Maddow began, her tone calm, composed. "Tonight's show is different. No opening monologue. No commercial break. Just 2 chairs, facing each other across a small table." Maddow continued. "Our guest tonight is a sitting member of Congress. She has made headlines. She has stirred controversy. And she's agreed to speak without preconditions." Marjorie Taylor Greene nodded once, then looked directly at the camera. "Thanks for having me." It was the only time that phrase would be spoken. The first 5 minutes were formal. Policy talk, border security, spending bills. Greene answered confidently, using practiced talking points, tone polished, firm, rehearsed. But Maddow's questions weren't the usual kind. They didn't ask what Greene believed. They asked why she believed it. "What's the end state?" Maddow asked during a discussion on mass deportations. "What does America look like the day after we do everything you're proposing?" Greene's brow furrowed slightly. She answered quickly, citing law, order, sovereignty. But Maddow didn't move on. "No, I mean the human picture. Where are the buses going? Who's driving them? Where do the families go?" Greene didn't hesitate. "They go back to their countries." Maddow let the answer hang. "And the children born here? Where do they go?" "They follow their parents." "And if the law says they're citizens?" A silence. Not long. Just enough. Then Greene answered. "We changed the law." Maddow's voice stayed calm. "You've said you support law and order. What's the process for removing a constitutional amendment?" Greene paused this time. "I'm not here to play law school games." "It's not a game," Maddow replied. "It's the structure of the country you swore an oath to uphold." The audience was silent. This wasn't a debate. It wasn't even a clash, not yet. It was a tremor, the kind you feel in your chest before the air moves. They moved on, to gun rights. That's when the lines started to blur. Greene leaned forward. "Every American has the God-given right to defend themselves." Maddow nodded once. "Even with weapons capable of killing dozens in seconds. Especially those weapons." "Why?" Greene sat up straighter. "Because the government should fear the people, not the other way around. And you believe we're at the point where the government should be afraid of us." Greene didn't blink. "We're past that point." There was no gasp, no dramatic cutaway, just a shift. A current to Maddow's hands folded in her lap. Her voice quieter now. "Do you understand how that sounds to people who've lost children in school shootings?" Greene's voice did not waver. "They don't get to take my rights away because of what a criminal did." "I'm not talking about rights," Maddow said. "I'm talking about empathy." Greene narrowed her eyes. "I don't owe empathy to tyranny." That was the sentence. The one that made a producer offstage look toward the exit lights. The one that made Maddow's face change, not with anger, but something colder. Stillness. She looked at Greene, long and direct. "You think a mother whose child bled out in a classroom is tyranny?" Greene didn't move. "I think the politicians exploiting her grief are." The air inside the studio stopped moving. There was no shouting. No screaming. No one stormed out. But something had broken, and everyone knew it. Something changed behind Rachel Maddow's eyes. Not rage. Not disbelief. Not even disappointment. What flickered there was calculation. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a moment. And she recognized it. Greene had crossed a line that couldn't be walked back. But it wasn't the content. It was the tone. Detached. Precise. Untouched by consequence. That was what struck Maddow hardest. Not that Greene had said those words, but that she had said them like she'd said them before. Like they had been rehearsed for a room far from this one. The next question came slower. Maddow leaned in, her elbows resting gently on the table, her voice soft but sharp. Congresswoman, do you believe civil war is inevitable in this country? The audience murmured. The crew stiffened. Greene didn't flinch. No, she said. I believe it's preventable, if people in power start listening. To whom? To the real Americans. Maddow's brow tightened. What does that mean? Who qualifies? Greene sat back, crossing one leg over the other. People who work. People who pray. People who follow the Constitution and don't want it rewritten every time someone's feelings get hurt. And those who don't fit that category, they can choose to get in line. Or move aside. There it was. Not a threat. Not even a warning. Just a declaration of terms. Maddow paused. She didn't respond immediately. Her hands remained still, her posture unchanged. But her next words landed like a blade placed calmly on the table. You're describing purity. Greene blinked. What? You're defining citizenship through behavior, not law? Through loyalty, not rights. That's not patriotism. That's purity. I'm describing reality. No, Maddow replied. You're describing your version of it. The tension in the room turned. Not explosive, but invasive. As if the conversation had stopped being about politics and started being about something else. Moral gravity. Maddow adjusted her glasses. You often say you speak for the forgotten. I do, but you've never once said you listen to them. Greene smirked. Maybe you don't know what listening looks like. No, Maddow said. I just think when someone tells you they're scared, you shouldn't answer by getting louder. A subtle shift began in the audience. Crossed arms. Eyes narrowing. Silence, but not neutral. Some leaned toward Maddow. Others leaned back. But the dividing line had appeared. The conversation was no longer about policy. It was about identity. And whose version of America would be allowed to define the rest. Then Maddow did something rare. She broke her own format. Congresswoman, she said, setting down her pen, I want to show you something. The screen behind them lit up. A clip from a town hall in rural Georgia. A mother, standing in a high school gymnasium, holding a photo of her teenage son, killed in a drive-by shooting. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shouting. She was asking. Just one question. What do I tell my daughter when she asks if her brother died for nothing? The clip ended. Silence. Maddow looked to Greene. She lives in your district. Greene didn't hesitate. I've met her. I told her what I tell everyone. That evil exists. And we fight it by being stronger, not weaker. And by stronger, you mean what? Armed. Ready. Responsible. Maddow didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence did the work. For a moment, it was unclear whether Greene would stay in her seat. Her fingers tapped the table once. Then again. A signal, not of impatience, but of restraint. She knew this was slipping. Not the audience. Not the optics. Something deeper. Control. The ability to steer. To command the tempo. And Maddow wasn't giving it back. Then came the question that cracked the shell. You've said before that empathy is a tool used by the left to manipulate policy, Maddow said. Yes, Greene replied flatly. Do you believe it's ever a strength? Greene's eyes narrowed. Not when it overrides reason. So reason is empathy's enemy? No, Greene said, her voice hardening. Emotion is. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't exaggerated. But in that line, the audience heard the machinery behind her worldview. A world where logic lived separate from loss. Where feelings were liabilities. Where compassion was framed as a political weapon. Maddow didn't argue. She just asked one more thing. What are you afraid of? Greene stared back. I'm afraid we're losing the country. All of it. The part that matters. That was it. The moment that cracked whatever civility was left. Maddow leaned back slowly. Her mouth moved, but no words came. Because some statements don't need rebuttals. They need recording. And in that moment, millions watching at home realized. This wasn't two sides debating America's future. This was one side revealing its terms. And the other refusing to sign. It started with a single glance. Then another. Two producers at opposite ends of the control booth exchanged a silent calculation. How close were they to the edge? One of them reached for a comms button but didn't press it. The other was already mid-text to the legal team. This wasn't about what Greene had said. It was about what might be coming. On air, Maddow hadn't moved. Still seated, still quiet. But she wasn't retreating. She was listening. Greene had just drawn her line in the sand. Now the room had to decide if it would step over it. The next question came without a smile. Do you believe the press is the enemy of the people? A pause. Greene leaned forward, folding her hands like a courtroom witness. I believe many in the press have abandoned objectivity. That's not journalism. That's activism. Is that what you believe I'm doing now? Maddow's voice didn't waver. Greene shrugged. You brought me here for an ambush. I'm responding. I asked questions. You answered. And now you're moralizing. No, Maddow replied. I'm clarifying. Behind the scenes, a floor manager stepped closer to the stage. Earpiece hot. No script in hand. The show was off format now. And if it kept drifting, someone would need to make a call. Greene's next statement shifted everything. You sit there in New York with your signals and your buzzwords, pretending to understand the country. But outside of these studios, real Americans are preparing. They're organizing. And if you keep pushing, are you threatening the press? Maddow didn't blink. I'm describing the atmosphere your side has created. Your side. Maddow's voice dropped in volume, but not intensity. There are no sides when it comes to truth. Greene's tone turned sharp. That's exactly the problem. Audience reactions had changed. They weren't gasping or cheering. They were tracking. Eyes narrowed. Phones silent. A collective realization. This was no longer entertainment. This was exposure. And no matter how it ended, someone's mask would fall. Then Rachel Maddow made a decision. She stood. Not abruptly. Not performatively. Just rose. Her body language didn't say, I'm done. It said, this changes now. Congresswoman, she said, you've suggested this country needs purification. You've dismissed empathy as weakness. You've questioned the legitimacy of journalism and threatened retaliation against people who disagree with you. I said what people are thinking. No, Maddow said. You said what you wanted them to think. A long pause. Greene pushed back from the table an inch. Not quite leaving, but ready to. Are you ending the interview? No, Maddow replied. I'm ending the illusion. One of the producers whispered into the director's ear. She's going off script again. Let her, the director said quietly. She's never been clearer. Maddow turned to the camera. Her audience. In moments like this, clarity matters more than civility. This interview has revealed something. Not about the person sitting across from me, but about the stakes we're living through, and how easily fear dresses itself as patriotism. Greene interjected. Spare me the monologue. Maddow looked back at her. It's not a monologue. It's a mirror. In that instant, the floor manager received a signal. Go. Two security staff stepped forward, not aggressively, but visibly. Greene saw them, stood slowly, and looked directly at Maddow. This'll make you a hero to your echo chamber. Maddow nodded slightly. And what will it make you? Greene smirked. A martyr. The camera stayed wide. No cuts. No music. Just the image of Greene walking off the stage, unescorted. Not shouted out. Not dragged. Just leaving. Because the room no longer played by her rules. Back in the control booth, no one spoke for a full 10 seconds. Then the director said flatly, keep rolling. Maddow sat back down, looked at the table, and quietly closed her notes. She didn't speak for the rest of the segment, and she didn't need to. In the control room, the lights dimmed as the show faded to commercial. But no one moved. The silence wasn't strategic. It was stunned. The broadcast had ended, but its aftershock was still unfolding. Not through cables or signals, but in the human nervous system. Producers leaned back in their chairs. Camera operators stood frozen beside their equipment. No one asked the question that lingered unspoken. Did we just witness something historic? Because deep down, they already knew. Online, the moment detonated. Within minutes, clips from the confrontation hit social media. No edits. No overlays. Just raw footage. Rachel Maddow calmly dismantling a worldview on live television, and Greene walking off a set that refused to let her rewrite its rules. Some viewers called it courageous. Others called it manipulative. Everyone kept watching. Inside MSNBC headquarters, an executive's phone began vibrating so fast it fell off the desk. Not because of backlash, but because of viewership. In an era where everything is content, this moment had become something more. Evidence of where we were, of what people were willing to say in the open, of what happens when you speak plainly in a time of spin. Meanwhile, in her dressing room, Rachel Maddow was sitting alone. No makeup artist, no assistants, just her and a glass of water. She hadn't said much since the segment ended. Not out of regret, out of necessity, because what had just happened didn't require defense. It required digestion. A producer knocked gently on the door. She didn't look up. Yeah, we've got people from NPR, BBC, Le Monde, and The Atlantic asking for statements. No, Maddow said without turning. No statements. They're saying this moment might go global. I didn't do it to go global. Why'd you do it then? Maddow finally looked up. Because letting it slide was no longer an option. That night, Greene tweeted, I walked into hostile territory and told the truth. They couldn't handle it. America is waking up. The tweet went viral. So did the responses. But beneath the noise, a deeper current began to form. People weren't debating facts. They were debating values. Not what was said, but what it meant, and what it revealed. On cable news, the spin machines kicked in. Some hosts called Maddow disrespectful. Others said Greene had embarrassed herself. But those who watched the full interview, not the cut-downs, not the hot takes, felt something more disorienting. A loss of illusion. It wasn't the theatrics that hit hardest. It was the calmness. The refusal to match rage with rage. The decision to meet a loaded ideology with precision, restraint, and brutal moral clarity. That's what haunted viewers. Not the clash, but the clarity. The next morning, in a small cafe in Milwaukee, a retired schoolteacher sat with her granddaughter watching the clip again. She didn't say anything until the very end. Then she leaned forward and whispered, "This is the part where people decide who they really are." Back at MSNBC, the clip was already being archived. It would become required viewing in journalism courses within a year. Not because it was flawless, but because it didn't flinch. 2 days later, Maddow addressed the fallout briefly on her next broadcast. Only one sentence. We don't invite guests to attack them, but when the truth tries to leave the building, we do not follow it out. As for Greene, she doubled down. She booked 3 more interviews in the following week. But none of them were quite the same. Because now, every audience knew exactly what to expect. And every host knew what could happen if they let the mask slip. But the clip lived on. Not just as content. Not just as confrontation. But as a case study in moral tension. A line in the cultural sand. Because in a moment where most chose to pivot, Rachel Maddow stood still. And that stillness was the loudest thing anyone had heard all week.